Okay, if you guys would look up here. So I tend to emphasize that this, just like, you know, if you go into painting and you took my painting class, that color theory, color wheel is theory. This is also theory. That oftentimes with the 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective, you're not really going to see that extreme of perspective unless you can see for miles. Really, you won't see how things line up like that. But knowing those ahead of time, you'll know how things kind of are slightly influenced in terms of like still lives, because we've mostly been drawing from still lives. So 1 point perspective, pretty simple. We have a horizon line, we have a vanishing point, which is where all the lines converge to. So if I have a shape here and a shape here, in 1 point perspective, all the lines of these squares will converge to that 1 point. Two point is a horizon line, vanishing point, and then converging this way. You think of kind of like you're standing on the corner of a street and you're looking down two streets at the corner of a building. And then I have a better demo of 3 point. Over here. And then 3 point perspective is as if you're looking kind of up a little bit, or it can also be down. So we have vanishing point, vanishing point, vanishing point, and then a vanishing point. Could be up here instead of down here. Again, buildings are the super easiest examples to point to with these perspective things. We also have atmospheric perspective, which could be a little bit more important if you go into like landscapes particularly. Let's say we have a mountain range here, and a mountain range here. As things move back in this kind of mountain range, this range is going to be lighter than this forward range. You can kind of observe this if you look at a series of mountains at a distance. This will be, let's say, dark, a middle value, and then a lighter value. And the reason that happens from light is that through the air, there's water vapor in the air floating around. And as you're looking back at this back range, you're looking through miles of that water vapor, which begins to kind of build up and obscure things more, which is why as things go further back, they become lighter in value. And it's not that the actual value is, lighter of this object from far away. It's that there's so much interference basically in between. Isometric perspective too, I kind of want to go into, just so that you know these things. This is a very stylized kind of perspective. Let me see if I draw this right. Isometric perspective is used in like Japanese woodblock prints a lot. And it's a pretty interesting perspective that instead of converging on points, everything is parallel. So the lines going in this direction are all parallel to each other. and the lines moving in this direction are all parallel to each other. And usually it's kind of like they converge at a 90-degree angle, which is also really good for, people don't really do it anymore, but mechanical drawing before CAD, it's a really good way of seeing spaces and seeing around objects without having to worry about, well, it's tilted slightly in a perspective. You can get a good range of what this object looks like if you use kind of isometric perspective to kind of build it up. Oftentimes they use it in Japanese wood block prints to show like the interiors of rooms and what's going on, in the hallway and in the room over, because it's kind of like a cutout for the room. And so what will be really important for us is the horizon line and the eye line. So if I see an object, you can see all these kind of circular discs, and it's perfectly at the horizon line. The top of that object, for like a cylinder, is going to be totally flat. Like I'm not going to be able to see the roundness of it. And you can kind of see this yourself if you kind of stand up and go lower to any kind of cylinder. You can see into it because the cylinder is lower than your eye level. It's going to be a little bit more of an open mouth. And as you go perfectly eye level with the top of that cylinder, it gets totally flat. And then as you go, as it gets above you, or as you go underneath it and you're kind of looking up at it, you're going to be looking at the bottom of it. And then as you kind of go even lower, it's going to be opened up even more. And then these are going to be similar because it's a disc, the roundness of this. When you draw these, that's not the best drawing of it, but be careful not to put one shape here, and make kind of a lemon. It's going to have smoother transitions, even if it's a very tight curve right there. So then, as you stand over it more and more, that mouth is going to be opened up. Oops. And you're going to be seeing into it. As you have an object that, let's say the bottom is a little bit below eye level, we're going to have this. And if it's tall enough, it's going to be above, so it'll have this. It'll be rounded. That's a super extreme version. That's like a building or like a pillar that would be taller than you. But keep that in mind too for these objects, that what happens on the bottom because of how tall they are is going to be affected and inform what happens on the top. It won't be flat and round. That is almost like a toothpaste tube where you're saying that it's pinched flat. You're saying that it's pinched flat at the bottom and then round at the top. You're still going to have some roundness in the bottom. And it's the same thing with, you see this mostly in cylinders, like that ellipse can be really hard to track. But with cubes or rectangular prisms, it's the same thing, where if you were looking at it like a super thin wafer kind of size thing, it's going to be totally flat if it's at eye level. And as you see underneath it, it's going to start to open up. And then, same thing with the top. We're going to see slightly more of the square, and then it's almost going to start to lay down. With the square, and this is exaggerated because it is just, like I said, theory. I'm not drawing from any kind of reference. You can see how it's starting to push in at this back edge. Because if I drew the square like this, what I'm saying is that it's totally flat to me right here. So oftentimes that square is going to have a little bit of push and get a little bit smaller on this back line than it is on the front line, front edge. So keep that in mind, because one of the things I put up there is that cardboard circle, which is not going to if you are drawing this out, drawing that cardboard circle that's flat and going back in space like this is going to indicate that it's standing up like this. That's not at all what you want to indicate. So it's going to be more like this with objects on it. The other thing is the kind of cups. I guess that's a cup over here, but like vase shape, where it has the open mouth. Be sure to accurately track that and spend time doing that. And there are some pretty complicated ways that you can do that. I think they're overcomplicated. So one of the ways that I think is the easiest that we've already learned is the measuring this lip to here and here to here. And you'll have the basic points of width, or openness, I guess, this way, and then openness this way, and then working on getting a smooth ellipse in this direction. Specifically for the open cups too, because getting that accurate will make them feel like there's more depth. I encourage you, what I want you to do is draw through these objects too. And by that I mean more like this. I would use an H pencil and you can go darker. You don't necessarily need the full strength of the layout pencil, but using that will be fine too. Don't go super thick with your lines, but drawing through an object is going to be imagining the bottom and the back edge that you can't even see. But you can, with these objects, you can pin them out. So with our rectangular prism that's standing upright, I know that the front is like this, and I see that side edge like this. So I would use a darker pencil for this after you kind of get those measurements in, and then using darker pencil for this too, and then using a lighter pencil to kind of draw through here and here, just so that you're working on correctly mapping what the bottom of this face looks like in relationship to this top face. So this will be with light pencil, and this will be with dark pencil. You can even draw that in and kind of erase it so that it has a little bit of a mark left. I want the same thing with the cylinders, just so that you're really making choices about what this bottom cylinder looks like. And by that I mean, you can fake a good amount. Yeah, it's kind of accurate, but you're not really committing to what that shape really looks like. I want to promote you guys thinking more three-dimensionally, and this perspective part will be a good way to do it. You don't need to worry about shadows or values, just where the objects sit next to each other and the shapes of the tops and what it would look like in the back. If you have problems with that, I can totally come around and help you. But what will also help is getting up and walking around it if you have to figure out what exactly is going on back there. With the handle, and then this is going to be easier if you draw it like the size of the death mask, because there's on this one it has the handle, the cup has the handle. Drawing that and then giving that handle a little bit of thickness where you know that it's kind of moving like that will be important. Yeah, so we're going with as accurate as we can get these, and keeping them nice and clean is the main objective. I think I'm going to try to find one more object. Oh, well, you kind of already know this. It's kind of obvious, but I just want to speak it into existence, just so you know. If I have this as the horizon line, even if you don't have a super obvious horizon line, an object that is closer to me is going to be quite a bit larger, and an object that's farther away starts to get smaller. And then also overlapping. Let me see how I do this better. helps to indicate in perspective where objects are. This object is in front, so it should be closer than this object is to me, even if it's like 6 inches or whatever. And building on that in perspective is going to be important for kind of boxing out the volume of how much space these things take up. Because if you're drawing and it feels like they're just somehow awkwardly merging into each other, it can be really weird in perspective. So one of the other things you might want to avoid is tangents. So this is a tangent right here. And what it just means is that two lines are lining up in a very awkward way that I understand, observing it from life, these are two totally separate objects, and they just happen to be sitting in a plane that looks like they're running into each other. But when you draw that, you might want to move to an angle that, we don't have any of these tangents, because it becomes problematic. It doesn't make sense in a drawing. It can make sense from observing it from life, but it doesn't make sense from a drawing. We can also have, I know in some of the bottles, that bottle still life, we had like this going on where that point is lining up perfectly with that edge of the bottle behind it. Try to avoid those two, so that the bottle's more like this and that cone is going off, so that you get the overlapping effect of that perspective much better. That's going to help you too. One second. That's going to help you too for choosing still lifes in the next project too, to avoid confusion of anything where it's like, I'm going to choose an angle so that I minimize my tangents and I can maximize the space by really utilizing the overlapping of things. Yeah. What was your question?
So like no detail and like when on the bottom of the object there's that little ridge and like I have to ask.
Like in terms of thickness. Yeah, you can draw. Oh, for the mug?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would draw a little bit of the, this is going to be a super simplified version of this.
I'm sorry for that.
No, it's fine. I was done with my thought anyway. So if we have the mug with that back line, trying to plot the general thickness of this line, it'll probably be more like this. Knowing from this perspective, so I know that the cup is generally, it has a sharper edge on the outside, and then on the inside it kind of, that's super, like if you cut it in half, the mug, that's a super extreme version of what it would look like. So you're more likely to see the thickness on this back edge and not the thickness on this forward edge. And you can draw that in with a line just like that. It'll probably be a lighter line in comparison. And that'll help to kind of show the depth with the mug handle. There will probably be areas that'll pop up too in terms of the circle on the bottom. It's going to have like a tiny bit of depth too. Observing or thickness. Observing exactly what we're doing or what we're seeing. The only exception is going to be, I think both of those are like folded cardboard boxes, the smaller ones. Don't worry about the like interior folds of the cardboard or like kind of the buckling. Just imagine that as like a square or a rectangle or whatever. You don't need to do like the folded paper sides or like the top. Totally ignore that. But it is important on the cups to draw kind of more of the thickness of it. As far as you can go in terms of what we might say is detail, without going into value or like the little imperfections on the paint. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the little specular reflections on the glossy mugs or anything like that. Totally ignore those things. Any questions? I'm gonna, I think, move things around because I want maybe one more object in there. And just to kind of try to maximize the perspective for everybody. But you can set up your drawings and sharpen your pencils. I would say do graphite. It's going to be a little bit easier to get like that clean accuracy. And the charcoal kind of might move around on you a little bit to be in the way.
You said about the dev mask size?
Yeah.
So this is just a line drawing, we don't have to worry about shading?
No, don't worry about shading at all. I might change the lighting on here just so that there are less shadows to get in your way. But yeah, don't worry about value transitions or any of that stuff. It's kind of a much less accelerated way of thinking about that. But we're still thinking about the volume and mass of these objects.
So, are we basically doing what that spectrum is?
Yeah, kind of like this one that's already up there. Yeah, well, and this ones are pretty faded. That's kind of good. I would go a little cleaner than these sketchy ones. We don't want them to be super sketchy. But just enough that you're kind of looking at three-dimensional objects. Yeah, exactly. I definitely want that to be perspective. So that'll be a little bit of challenge. Yeah, so I think move your seat and pick a spot that